And we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Logos Media's UnSpun episode number 140 with Lloyd De Jongh, and we're here to begin our fourth episode regarding our series on Islam titled Demystifying Islamic Doctrine, the Islamic Crusades, and this is part 4. And welcome. It's been an interesting week. Of course, the primary channel has been, the live feed on the main channel has been shut down, so we're making do. Hopefully some of you make it over here. Also, we realized that they had unpublished both of my Facebook groups, so people weren't getting notices over there as well. And shadow banning my pages. They locked me out of Facebook for a week, etc., for going on Alex Jones and exposing what I did. I appreciate everyone's support and donations. You have to go to the logosmedia.com website to support now. We cannot take any super chats right now, so I appreciate any people going directly to the website to support. And we've already got some people joining in the show right now. We're going to dive right in here in just a moment. We've got a lot to cover. Lloyd, did you happen to get yourself a PayPal address that people can donate to you as well for this research? Uh-oh, hold on a second. They can't hear you. Let me figure out what's going on here. You know what? I did something dumb here. Hold on a second. I forgot to put on my headphones. Give me just a second. As soon as, here, you can talk while I get my headphones on. Go ahead. Now they can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, just to repeat, yeah, please do support Jan. He's given me this platform, for which I'm very grateful, the chance to speak about Islam. Yeah, so he's the person you do need to support. He's the person that needs your help so that he can encourage people like myself and others to speak and to encourage you to hear these things and investigate the truth. Yeah, if you do enjoy the content that I'm putting out and you want to support me, because I do spend hours and hours on research, then yeah, if you'd like to, you can use this email address for PayPal. ldejongh _pl at outlook.com. That's LDEJONGH _PL at outlook.com.
And maybe if you want to post that in the chat, that would help too for people to see it there.
I will do so. I can show it a little bit later once I share my screen.
Sure.
Yeah.
And just, and I appreciate you letting people know to donate to me, but also, you just had to flee South Africa and you haven't had a job for a while and you need funds as well to pay the bills. So, and you're doing all of this on the side to help alert people to what's going on. So, I appreciate anybody supporting you as well.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you very much for that. But as I said, you gave me the platform, so I'm very grateful. It's because of your show that I have this audience and that others have had an audience. Yeah, so are there any questions before we begin, or any comments before we begin?
Well, why don't we do a little, recap of last Tuesday's show?
Okay, so yeah, let's do a little bit of housekeeping then. Okay, so last week, obviously, again, some people felt that what I was saying was very controversial. I do feel there's a consistent effort from people to not look into the doctrine, to give Islam a pass, and to constantly shift the blame, shift the investigation. There's copious amounts of research, documentation, you name it, on everything other than Islam, on Christianity, on you name it, on Judaism. Everyone will blame everyone else, but for some reason, Islam has always been getting a pass, and I do find that it's a very interesting issue that people are constantly trying to distract me from the main topic. Okay, so I'm going to throw in a couple of things. One, just to annoy people. One of the reasons possibly that people don't want to discuss Muhammad, why it's not allowed to have drawings of him. If you look at this quote here, this is actually in the Quran. In the Hadith, it is Sahih, so it is sound. This Muhammad of yours is a dwarf and fat. This is apparently a description of Muhammad. A man named Muslim who was there in the company mentioned it to me when Ubaidullah saw him. He said, "This Muhammad of yours is a dwarf and fat." So that may be insulting Muhammad is actually punishable by death, and for all I know, that may be why.
Lloyd, let me just interrupt you real quick. What can you paste your email address up right now? Somebody's asking for it right now to donate to you.
Okay, great. Let me.
Sorry to interrupt you right there.
Yeah, I would need to for that. I can share my screen for one moment. Is that, or how should I do this?
Well, yeah, you can share your screen, but you probably want to, or I'll type it in the chat there too.
L De Jongh _PL@outlook.com. Let me.
L De Jongh.
Yeah, let me see. Can I send this to you on PayPal? I'll just paste it to you into a PayPal chat. Sorry, Skype?
At outlook.com. Sure.
Yeah, L De Jongh _PL. Let me just send this to you because I was not.
Hopefully that's right. I'll let everybody know if that's incorrect. Do I have? Yeah. Okay. I do have Skype going there, so that'll work.
Okay, there it is. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it looks like I did get that right.
Yeah, no, it is a lot of work. I do spend literally hours researching and putting together this. Okay,
oh, no,
so
I didn't have it right. Sorry, I forgot the PL, duh.
Yeah, L De Jongh _PL@outlook.com. Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Okay, so last week we spoke about, again, to revisit the idea of Hubal, the god, the Nabatean god of kings. Further investigation has revealed that Muhammad is born into a tribe called the Quraysh, and the god of the Quraysh was Hubal. So he was not just the Nabatean god of kings, the Allah for the region of Arabia, in fact the prime god, he was also the god of the tribe that Muhammad grew up in. And as we said, his father's name was Abdullah, which was slave of Allah. Another point, along with the idea of slavery, is that black people in Islam, now the name for slave in Islam is Abd, A-B-D, like Abdullah, slave of Allah, A-B-D, Allah, Abdullah, slave of Allah. Black people are called Abid, which is just the same word, it's Abd, slaves. So the name for blacks in Islam is slaves. So that has become the common term for black people, Abid, Abd, slaves, because that's the typical state they were under Islam. Okay, now a couple of other things. Again, so many times I'm told that all of these Islamic sources I'm referring to are corrupted. Please, would someone let me know exactly which are the correct sources? And then also, if no English source can be used, can someone please tell me why Allah cannot speak English? How come the all-powerful God of Islam only speaks Arabic? Because that is the only language he seems to speak. And so please, which are the right sources? Which is the correct one? Okay, other things. There are 613 commands in the Bible that God gives to his people. The two prime commands, if we look at the New Testament, Jesus says, "Thou shalt love thy God, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy strength." And he also says, "Love thy neighbor as thyself." Those are the two prime commands within Christianity. But he's very different within Islam. There were mentions again of how Islam is very different to what I am portraying based on its own documentation. Well, when we looked at what the prime directives are in Islam, jihad again is the act that shows that is the prime act of devotion, the quickest way. Jihad is the quickest way to paradise in Islam. So that's a huge contrast between the message of Jesus and the message of Allah and Muhammad. Okay, then also there were thousands of good, it felt like it. There's so many contradictions that I was given about the origins of Islam, ranging from Napoleon did it, to the Jews did it, to the CIA did it, Mossad did it, the Christian Catholic Church did it, Bigfoot started it. Look, I don't know. You do understand there are dozens of different ideas that are thrown around, many of them entirely contradictory. You cannot all be right.
Well, and that's just it. A contradiction is always a lie or an error, and you don't know the truth until all the contradictions are gone. So, and we're not trying to focus on different theories on who corrupted or started Islam, etc. We're discussing what it is today through their own doctrines and documentation and scriptures, so that that anyone can check on their own. And we've been showing them on screen, so please focus on the citations. Anything, and I don't think we've, Abu is the only one who came up with any valid, citations to try to rebut you. And so far, all of the others have been ad hominem attacks and distraction and, just absurd remarks, appeals to ridicule, etc. So what we're doing in this series is just showing the citations on screen that anyone can go and verify for themselves and check it and see if what Lloyd is saying is correct. And so we're going to be showing those on screen. This is part 4, which will be going into the Islamic Crusades, which are against Europe now. And just to give a little preface, typically in any discussions regarding this, it's how the awful Christians went into the Middle East and attacked Islam, but were never taught the other side of the story. So tonight, we're going to be telling the other side of the story that people in the West, Christians, don't ever hear. Europeans, Americans, etc., don't hear. They don't get to hear what we're going to show today. So Islam typically gets a pass of total innocence, and they're just the poor victims. And we're going to show how that is simply not true.
All right. Yes. Certainly, I think I want to correct the narrative somewhat. So we're going to look at the doctrine of jihad versus the Crusades. The Crusades were a temporary phenomenon. They were a defensive war designed to prevent after Muhammad's death, the Islamic armies burst out of Arabia and invaded 28 countries within 5 years of his death. Within 400 years, they had captured, enslaved, killed, they had taken territory, they had at that point conquered almost 75% of the Christian lands.
And just to interject there, Lloyd, most of Saudi Arabia, Syria, Iran, Lebanon, etc., were originally predominantly Christian nations. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, even Arabia was predominantly Christian. It was Jewish, Christian, and pagan, and they were actually living peacefully together. But yeah, when Islam came, that changed. So where to start? So this was a very interesting topic to research. So let me share my screen. Let me start. So I'll share my main screen. Okay, that's this one. Okay, I'll move this to the side. Okay, you can see my screen?
It's coming up. There it goes.
Okay, so we have a lot to get through. So I'm going to talk about what Islam did that led to the defensive Christian Crusades, and discuss some of the differences and discuss some of the doctrinal influences that caused it. Okay, so we're looking at the Crusades. Now, the first Crusades began during the Middle Ages in the year 1095. This was as the result of a cry for help against invading Islamic armies. This is a very brief summary. This came 460 years after the first Christian city was overrun by Islamic armies, 457 years after Jerusalem was conquered by Islamic armies, 453 years after Egypt was taken from Christendom by Muslim armies, 443 years after Islamic armies invaded and plundered Italy. I will go into detail on all of these. 427 years after Islamic armies laid siege to Constantinople, 380 years after Spain was conquered by Islamic armies, 363 years after France was invaded by Muslim armies, and 249 years after Rome itself was attacked by Muslim armies, which is why the Vatican has that massive wall.
So apparently walls actually work.
Yes, yes, they do. Oh, I've seen plenty in the Middle East. Trust me, that was my job. This is only after 4 centuries of church burnings, killings, enslavement, and forced conversions of Christians. By the time the Crusades began, 2/3 of the Christian world had been conquered and people forced to convert or enslaved to Islam. So, without Charles Martel, the Battle of Tours in 732, the Temple Knights 1129 to 1312, Al Cid's reconquista in 1085, and the Venetian fleet at Lepanto 1571, the Polish and Austrian knights at the gates of Vienna in 1683, the Serbian Hajduks fighting off the Ottoman Turks in 1804, Europe might well have been converted to Islam because it was the intention of Islam to conquer and convert all of Europe. Okay, during this jihad that began in the 7th century, 3/4 since then of Christendom's original territory, including all of North Africa, Egypt, Syria, Anatolia, and much of Eastern Europe, was permanently swallowed by Islam. Okay?
Wow.
Now, yeah, it is actually surprising, the sheer numbers. So I'm going to go through a list of European countries alone that were affected. On the right-hand side, you'll see the Islamic Crusades from 630 to 1095.
Let me move this out of the way. All right.
That led to the Crusades. Now, and on the left here, I've got a list. So let's have a look. You can see this list here. These are countries in Europe that were affected by
Now,
Islamic.
Just to remark here, 2 of those countries listed there. All right, let me see. Do you have Albania on there? That should be on there too.
Yes, it is. It is.
Okay, yeah. So Albania is still Muslim, and Bosnia-Herzegovina is still Muslim today, and those were because of the Muslims and Turks coming up from the south, and Serbia has really taken the brunt of the force for hundreds of years, and it is because of Serbia that Europe is still Christian today and has not been overrun by Islam.
Correct. No, that is true. The Poles also contributed heavily to that. King Jan Sobieski of Poland also fought numerous battles against the Turks. But I'll get to that in a minute. So in 1993, Samuel Huntington wrote a book called The Clash of Civilizations.
Yep.
And his quote was, "Islam has bloody borders." This was controversial at the time, however, it is true. Okay, he says, in Eurasia, the great historic fault lines between civilizations are once more aflame. This is particularly true along the boundaries of the crescent-shaped Islamic bloc of nations. From Africa to Asia, violence occurs between Muslims on the one hand and Orthodox Serbs in the Balkans, Jews in Israel, Hindus in India, Buddhists in Burma, and Catholics in the Philippines. Islam has bloody borders. So, as the Ottoman Empire was declining after the defeat at the Battle of Vienna in 1683, where the Polish king, Jan Sobieski, crushed the Islamic armies that were at that point besieging Vienna for 2 months, the slavers of the Barbary coast of North Africa were attacking all along the coasts of Europe, reaching as far as Iceland. The United States' first war, which it fought before it could even elect its first president, was against Islamic slavers. The Marines were actually founded. If you look at their song, The Shores of Tripoli, the Marines were actually founded to put a stop to Islamic piracy and slavery that was capturing American ships and American people. In fact, at one point, America was paying up to 25% of its revenue, of its annual revenue, to stop these pirates from attacking its ships. They were bankrupting the US. Now, when Thomas Jefferson and John Adams asked the ambassador of Barbary why his countrymen were enslaving American sailors, the ambassador answered, "It is founded on the laws of our prophet. It is written in the Quran that it is their right and duty to make war upon them, the non-Muslims, wherever they could be found, and to make slaves of all they could take as prisoners." Now, this list here, you see in Portugal, Spain, France, Italy, Iceland, Denmark, England, Sicily, Switzerland, Austria, Hungary, Greece. These are countries that were attacked by Islamic armies that led to...
One I don't see on there is Ireland.
Yes, Ireland as well. I suppose that would be England. But
Well,
yeah, I mentioned that last week.
Don't tell the Irish that.
Yeah. Yeah, so between the 15th and 18th centuries alone, approximately 5 million Europeans in total were abducted and enslaved in the name of jihad. We do not know exactly how many were taken in the 8th and 11th centuries. This number is unknown. Okay, the largest Islamic army to invade European territory was 200,000 men that came to conquer Vienna. Okay, now let's have a look. Let's go back to the Islamic Crusades. Let's go to 630 AD or BC. No, AD, sorry. Muhammad conquers Mecca from his base in Medina with 30,000 men. In 632, Muhammad dies in Medina. Okay, Islam now controls all of Arabia and has either expelled, killed, or converted all Jews and Christians and all pagans. There's not a single Jew left in Arabia. 636, Muslim conquest of Syria. Syria is where the word Christianity was first used. It was a Christian nation. Okay, all the surrounding lands, all Christian, Palestine and Iraq, were all invaded. 637, Muslim Crusaders conquer Iraq. Then they annex Jerusalem in 638, taking it from the Byzantines. That's the Western Roman Empire. 638 to 650, Muslim Crusaders, Iran, Egypt, 642, 641, Syria and Palestine, 643 to 707, they conquer all of North Africa. There were 10 major churches along the North African coast. Apparently something like 10,000 churches were destroyed.
Wow.
644 to 650, Muslim Crusaders conquer Cyprus, Tripoli in North Africa, and establish Islamic rule in Iran, Afghanistan, and Sindh. This is 644. This is a few weeks before the Crusades started, if you look closely. 673 to 678, Arabs besiege Constantinople, okay, capital of the Byzantine Empire. 691, the Dome of the Rock is completed in Jerusalem, only 6 decades after Muhammad's death. 710, they conquer the Indus Valley, that's in India. 711, they conquer Spain, okay, and they impose the Kingdom of Andalus. Then they move into Europe. 718, the conquest of Spain is complete. 732, they invade France and they stopped at the Battle of Tours. Okay, Charles Martel, the grandfather of Charlemagne, defeats them and turns them back out of France. 762, foundation of Baghdad. 785, let's move on. Morocco, Christophoros, a Muslim who converted to Christianity, is executed. 800, okay, Muslim Crusaders enter Tunisia. 809, they enter Sardinia, Italy, and conquer it. 813, Christians in Palestine are attacked. Many flee the country. 831, they capture Palermo in Italy, and they start raids in southern Italy. For 400 years, there were no women in southern Italy within 100 kilometers of the coast. These slavers would come and capture all the women and take them to North Africa and Arabia. For 400 years. Why aren't we being told this? They conquer, then they raid Sicily, Corsica, Italy, and France. Okay, then they occupy Sicily and Sardinia. They take Cyprus and Tarsus. Then the Church of the Resurrection, or the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, is burned down by Muslims, and more churches in Jerusalem are attacked in 937. In 960, the Turks convert to Islam, okay, and they conquer Egypt, and they found Cairo. Israel and southern Syria again conquered by Muslims. The Church of St. Mark in Egypt is destroyed. The destruction of the Church of the Resurrection in 1009. In 1012, the oppressive decrees against Jews and Christians, and this is about dimitude. I will have to cover that in a bit. Then we have Mauritania, where there's still slavery today. Remember, Slavery was legally abolished there in 2007. It's still going on though. Okay, the Byzantines are defeated. 1071, Muslim Crusaders invade Palestine. Conquest of Jerusalem again in 1073. The Muslim Crusaders capture Nicaea. Notice these are all the major Christian capitals. These are all appear in the Bible. You know, the letters to all these places, Antioch, Nicaea, the Nicene Creed. Okay, they conquer Western Ghana. Okay, then we look at, let's see, the Byzantine Emperor Alexis, in 1094, the Byzantine Emperor Alexis Comnenus asks Western Christendom for help against the Muslim Turks, the Seljuks. And Pope Urban finally requests assistance from the knights in Europe, and they start the First Crusade. Now,
so what you're saying is it's not the poor victim Muslims, that the Crusades were actually in defense to, how many years was that? 600 years of invasions against Europe?
460 years.
460 years of invasions against Europe, and then finally the Christians stood up and did something about it.
Correct. So it took 460 years of where they took at that point over 60%, 65% of the Christian lands were conquered and converted to Islam. People killed, people driven out before there was finally a response from the Christians. So now what we have here is, so Hilaire Belloc wrote in 1870, during the peak of Western might and Muslim weakness, millions of people of the white civilization of Europe and America have forgotten about Islam. Okay, they've never come in contact with it. They take for granted it is decaying. But it is a fact that it is the most formidable and persistent enemy which our civilization has had. It may at any time become as large a menace in the future as it has been in the past. And then, worse than just forgetting, the West has rewritten history to fit postmodern leftist paradigms.
Wow.
Okay? The narrative is that Muslims are the historic victims of intolerant Christian culture. Right? So here we have, so if we look at these books, I spoke last week about slavery. We talk about Arabs, we talk about the Moors, the Ottomans, the Tatars. We don't say the word Muslim, we don't say Islam, right? In fact, the whole thing is about not naming the enemy, right? We don't talk about moderate Nazism. We don't talk about moderate communism. We talk about communism. We talk about Nazis. We don't talk about moderate Nazis, middle of the road Nazis. So we don't name the enemy. We try to rename the enemy. It's democratic Nazism. No, there's no such thing. You know, there's just Islam. There's no moderate Islam. It is just Islam. And we need to start calling it what it is so we can understand it and deal with it. So we also failed to mention jihad. Now, a couple of things. The History Channel, for instance, where does all of this come from? We have all of this propaganda, right? So I'll use one example here, the History Channel. In 2012, it aired a show called The Secrets of the Quran. The show explained the ideology of jihad as a result of the Crusades. It ignored all the evidence I just showed you above with all of the Islamic attacks. And that is not a comprehensive list. That is not a complete list that I gave, right? So they stated in this BBC documentary that Muslims are only supposed to use force in self-defense, obviously giving no evidence to this fact. They glossed over any of the events in Islamic history that proved that wrong. Okay? So the Islamic conquest of Syria, Palestine, Iraq, Iran, Egypt, India, you name it, go through the map, okay, was not discussed. And when they were discussed, they simply spoke of, well, they were spreading the word of Islam, right? So the implication was that Christianity was spread by the sword, Islam was spread by powerful conversation, apparently. Okay? So Islam was initially viewed as a religion for Arabs. Right? The earliest non-Arab converts had become affiliated with an Arab tribe, and they were subordinate. Equality for all Muslims in general, okay, was part of the Abbasid Caliphate, where they established that, well, you know, Islam is for all, but still that doesn't seem, because Arabic is still the major language, it is actually a form of Arab supremacism. Okay. So any questions? I've said plenty.
No. Well, while we were sitting here, Facebook just sent me a notice that they're banning me for 30 days now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Man, this doesn't help. Okay. No, this doesn't help at all. So
So please, everybody, need all your support. There, I just got the groups turned back on and everything. Now they're trying to block me again. It's the same tactics over and over and over. It's all they do is ban and harass.
okay. Yeah, man, I just wonder when that's going to start happening to me. So the Crusades were military expeditions during the Middle Ages conducted by European Catholics to defend Christian civilization. Okay, the Crusades developed as a result of the Christian world's struggle with Islamic Jihad. Islam's founder Muhammad formulated the concept of jihad, holy war, calling on Muslims to subjugate non-Muslims through warfare. They conquered 2/3 of the Christian world at that time. Okay, and through the 8th and 11th century, Christian lands were constantly invaded. So, and that takes us to the modern Crusades of today. All of this here. Okay, now I'm going to shift over to this side. Does anyone have any comments? Was there any question within the comment section?
Not really. The whole organized movement of these people and Africans into white nations with mostly combat-age males reeks of a diabolically evil plan. Geez, I wonder who could dream up such deeds.
Sorry, I didn't quite. What was the context? I didn't get that.
They're just talking about all of the, movement of all these people into white nations, mostly combat-age males, reeks of a diabolically evil plan.
No. Look, jihad. Okay, first of all, hijrah, which is migration, is a form of jihad. It is one of the precepts of Islam. Remember, the year zero of Islam, their calendar begins at the year that Muhammad migrated from Mecca to Medina. It is that important. Migration is that important in Islam. It is the year zero in their calendar. Muhammad did it, therefore they do it. If you die in the process of jihad, if your little dinghy capsizes and you die, you go straight to heaven. Okay, so a couple of things. So I'm going to talk about a few myths about the Crusades. Again, not an exhaustive treatment, but I want to. The term Crusades is a fairly new term. Okay, they were called Fidelis Sancti Petri, faithful of Saint Peter. They were called Militias Christi, Knights of Christ. So this is a fairly modern term that only appears in the 17th century. Okay, it was considered an armed pilgrimage. Okay, also before the 16th century, the words Muslim and Islam were not used. They were called Saracens. Right. Now the Crusades have to be called by a pope. And they had specific rules called the rules of the just war, right? But only a pope could call a crusade, right? It had to be for specific reasons. It offered rules. Now, not to say that the rules were always followed, not to say that people didn't sometimes go off or take advantage of the confusion of warfare, because look, warfare is warfare. Crimes happen, right? Atrocities happen. Now, it is thought that people got wealthy from the Crusades. No, in fact, Crusades involved sacrifice. Crusades involved cost. Most crusaders came back poor, if they came back at all. They were trying to save their fellow man, their fellow Christian, from subjugation under Islam. Okay, so there was no implication and no expectation of a financial reward for those who engaged in the Crusades. Now, another thing I want to mention. So while they were undertaken in the name of Christendom, okay, they also were not done necessarily just for religious reasons. There was a religious sanction, right? Okay, now, in the Encyclopedia of Wars, right, Charles Phillips and Alan Axelrod attempt a comprehensive listing of all wars in history. Now, it's actually not that a comprehensive listing, because there are many engagements that are not documented here, but they document 1,763 wars. And what they find is 123 of those have been classified to involve a religious component, right? Could be termed religious conflicts. However, if you remove all of the Christian conflicts, the majority of those are Islamic wars, 66. So of the 6.98% of all wars which are religious, right, more than half of those are due to Islam alone. Okay, so just to note that of the religious wars, more than half can be attributed directly to Islam, as you can see there. Okay, so Now, the Crusades are considered as wars of unprovoked aggression against the Muslim world. Again, I've given you this list. This is another list similar. Okay, Muslim invasion of France. I've got these here, Christians in Palestine. So again, the Crusades were a response to the aggression, the unprovoked aggression of Islamic invaders acting in the name of jihad. So the Palestine, the home of Jesus, conquered. Okay, this is where he was born, conducted his ministry, and died and resurrected. Egypt, the birthplace of Christian monasticism and home to saints and theologians, conquered. It's Islamic now, no longer Christian. Asia Minor, where St. Paul planted the seeds of the first Christian communities, no longer Christian, right? So the Crusades were a counterattack, okay? Within the Middle Ages, three of Christianity's five primary episcopal sees, Jerusalem, Antioch, and Alexandria, had been captured by the 7th century, right? The two others, Rome and Constantinople, had been attacked in the centuries prior to the Crusades. Of those, one could say only Rome at this point stands independent. The rest have all been taken and are now Islamized. Okay, so Constantinople was taken in 1453, leaving only Rome in Christian hands by 1500. So 4 of the 5 major Christian, what would one call it, the sees, were 80% of at that point of Christianity was in Islamic hands. So by 1500, so who were the aggressors here, right? So St. Augustine then also formulated the concept of the just war, a defensive war in reaction to an act of aggression. Violence was then considered ethically neutral. It could be employed either for evil or against it, and they felt they needed to stand against the aggression of Islam. Pope Urban called the First Crusade in 1095. Okay, so now question, how many times have Christian forces attacked either Mecca or Medina? We constantly hear, if you go on YouTube, you will see constant accusations of, well, we left Europe to attack the Middle East. Well, honestly, how many times have Christian forces attacked Mecca or Medina? The answer is 0. Okay. Now Pope Alexander, now it's also, there's talk about the fact that, the apparent implication that that the popes preached only violence. This is not the case. This is, again, is not a comprehensive dealing of the issue, but when you look at the proclamations by the popes, and this is just one of them, in their warfare, they should devote themselves to this objective alone, namely, either to protect Christians from the Saracen attacks or be in a position to induce the Saracens to follow the Christian faith. This is very, very different to the jihad that was conducted by the Muslims, which was to take Christian lands, enslave them, as we discussed last week. Okay, induce them to follow the Christian faith does not mean forcible conversion, but it means allowing evangelization. In the Muslim, now look at what in the Muqaddimah we have Ibn Khaldun saying, in the Muslim community, holy war is a religious duty because the universalism of the Muslim mission and the obligation to convert everybody to Islam either by persuasion or by force. Okay? So, in terms of crusade and jihad, the Crusades were a defense against the jihad, not an attempt to seize Muslim lands or acquire new converts. So for 200 years that the Crusades were occurring, and I'll show you something else here. What we had was that this allowed Europe time to defend itself, to grow, to strengthen its armies, and ultimately to fight off Islamic invasion. Now I'm going to go to a video. Okay, so for those of you who have not seen this, this is actually very, very useful. It's very popular on YouTube. We're going to show only the battles that affected the Greek and Roman areas. This excludes everything else. So we're going to see 548 Islamic battles and 12 in response by the Crusaders to defend Christianity. So let's have a look here. Does the audio come through?
No, it's not coming in through. You need to, when you share screen, you need to share audio.
Okay, so every time you see the white dots flash, that is a 20-year period. So this thing steps forward in 20-year period. So the death of Muhammad, okay, Arabia was Christian, Jewish, and pagan. Then Muhammad dies in 632, and now let's go. Within 5 years, all of Saudi Arabia is Islamized, and all of these cities are where Islam has sent its troops. All of these red dots.
Do you want to reshare your screen and click the button that says share audio?
Of course, yeah. Okay, let me do that. I'll stop sharing and I will reshare. Thank you. And then when I say share computer sound, I will do share.
And immediately, and here, so you can see a history. This may seem a little confusing, but I think when you see it, you'll know exactly what I mean. And here
Can
it
you turn
starts.
down the volume just a little bit on that?
I don't have, unfortunately. This is not the original.
All right, go ahead. Yeah, I mean, if you down there on the bottom right, you've got a volume thing there. If you could turn it down just a little bit, there you go.
Oh, turn down. You mean down a bit?
Down, yes, down. All right,
oh,
thank you.
Okay, it's halfway.
And immediately starts attacking the Middle East. And notice that it doesn't take long until they're crossing the Mediterranean and attacking southern France.
So now they're in
and
Spain, France.
Notice something here.
All of the
Most
south of
people
Europe,
think
all of North Africa.
Islam, they think of Arabs. They think of Arabs. They think of desert. And yet here we see that Islam is projecting power throughout the Mediterranean. Notice how the little islands of the Mediterranean are getting hammered. The navy of Islam would attack coastal towns, kill, rob, rape, and then take slaves. So this whole battle map, as it unfolds, you're seeing slaves being taken. Over 1 million slaves were taken out of Europe into the Islamic world. That's something you don't think about much, but it's absolutely true.
We know where this.
There were over 200 battles fought.
Can't hear you. Just wait.
And we also see, however, on the east coast in Turkey, that Islam is trying to break into Europe. Now, what's going to happen is, in Spain, this ongoing fight that lasted for 400 years, is the Christians are going to push back the Muslims. But now then, what has happened over in the east is that Constantinople has fallen, and now then Eastern Europe is getting hammered. The jihad now comes to Eastern Europe. It's pushed out now of Spain. Northern Africa is now completely Islamic. The Middle East is completely Islamic. This is all jihad, relentless jihad. And why is it so relentless? Well, Muhammad was relentless in his jihad. And these people are good students of Islam, and so it's against the kafir, on and on. It was traditional that when the Sultan came to power, the brand new Sultan, he would immediately try to launch new wars because he was going to be noted in his Islamic history as to how well he fought against the kafir.
Okay, so I discussed last week, and I showed the week prior as well when we discussed jihad.
Do you want to take it out of share screen, or?
I'll have to go. I'll have to come back to this in a minute.
Okay.
So I will. So I did discuss how jihad is imperative upon all Muslims. They have to, and so the Crusades was a response to this. Look at how much territory these Muslims have conquered in the name of jihad. I'm now going to skip forward, and now we're going to see what the Crusades were like, what the scale of the Crusades were like in comparison. Okay, this is about 15 seconds here of footage. I'm going to start rolling this now.
And so it begins. The Crusades enter into Turkey and the Middle East. Battles go on, but aren't there far fewer than you thought there might be? And here we go. The last battles are fought, and
that's it. That is it. Those were the Crusades. We're looking at something like 12 or 15 battles versus 548. 548 Islamic battles against the Western against Christendom versus something like, well, that tiny little smattering over there. So I don't see how these can be considered to be morally equivalent. These are clearly just not near the same scale. This is Mickey Mouse by comparison of what the Islamic Jihad was responsible for. Any thoughts or comments from anyone in the comments? Jan?
No. Jews opened the gates of Constantinople, and now they're just nothing important. So,
well, look, the thing is, why can't we just look at Islam and look at what it did.
Right.
without-
Yeah. So what they're trying to do is immediately spin it that it was the Jews' fault, rather than look at what you just showed. I mean, these people in the comments, they're not even paying attention. It's like they're asleep or in a dream somewhere. It's amazing.
Right. So, yeah. So anyway, so we've got all of these things that happened. Let's skip all that. Okay, so we've seen that there is a huge amount going on there. I want to go now to this section here. So one of the things that was happening is that this is what happens to, now, the documentation from the Crusades tells us that they went to free Christians from the horrible exploitation they were experiencing. We've already discussed what slavery did to them. Obviously, the sex slavery that was common in Islam, that was legal and lawful and rife within Islam. When you are a non-Muslim subject of the Islamic State, you become a dhimmi. The dhimmi translates as guilty or blamed. Okay, so you are guilty or blamed, and they have an entire doctrine for dealing with the dhimmi, and I will go into that. This is how the dhimmis are treated. The honor of Islam lies in insulting kufr and kafirs. Okay, unbelief and people who have unbelief. Us, that's you and me. One who respects the kafirs dishonors the Muslims. The real purpose of levying jizya, which is the tribute that non-Muslims were forced to pay. ISIS did this to people living in their territory, is that they may not be able to, is to humiliate them. They may not be able to dress well or live in grandeur. They must constantly remain terrified and trembling. It is intended to hold them under contempt and uphold the honor and might of Islam. Sufi Saint Ahmad said, Hindi, if you thought the Sufis were nice, warm, and fuzzy, you were wrong. So now if we start looking at the most protected and respected of all non-Muslims, and don't take these words literally if I were you, are the people of the book. The dhimmi is derived from the Arabic root meaning guilt or blame. Okay? And basically, these are safeguards that can be extended. These are legal Islamic Sharia safeguards extended to protect the blameworthy. Now, this is the same kind of protection that the mafia gives you when they take over your territory. It is, you pay, the jizya is protection money. No different to what the mafia did, what a gang does. Pay protection or get hurt. Okay, so a hypocrite, this is again from Islamic doctrine. A hypocrite is considered to be a Muslim in name only. They are distinguished from true Muslims by an unwillingness to wage war. So a hypocrite is a Muslim who's unwilling to wage war. He's unwilling to fund holy war. The Quran says that true believers fight and are harsh to unbelievers. Okay? It is an order. This is in Tirmidhi, which is one of the major tafsirs. It is an order for Muslims that they should not give leeway to non-Muslims and should not greet them first nor yield for them. So in other words, if you're walking on the street and a Muslim came towards you and you were a dhimmi in the Islamic State, you had to give way. You were not allowed to walk in the way of a Muslim. You had, if you were on a bench, you had to get up and let them stand. You were not allowed to ride a horse. Let's see. Their houses may not be higher than the Muslims. The dhimmi may not ride an elegant horse or a mule. He may ride a donkey only if the saddle is made of wood. He may not walk in the good part of the road. He must wear an identifying patch. Dhimmis must hold their tongue. Remember, this is in the Sharia. These are laws. They actually have a list of, it's called the Pact of Umar, right? Now, what is interesting is that during World War II, from the research that I have, and I understand there's millions of different conspiracy theories and there's millions of different ideas. Again, they can't all be correct, but Hitler wanted to displace the Jews and ship them out. And he was, at that time, a guest of his was the Grand Imam of Jerusalem. And what happened is that he did not want these Jews moving to Jerusalem and getting under his feet where they were in Palestine. So what happened was he was the one who suggested that they wear the yellow star. The dhimmis must wear an identifying patch. So this Haji Amin, he suggested that Hitler gives the Jews yellow stars, and he suggested that he burns them because that would be what Islam wants to do to them. Okay, the dhimmi is not obliged to mention Allah or his apostles. Okay, they must offer up the jizya. The dhimmi must hang his head while the official takes hold of his beard and hits the dhimmi on the bone beneath his ear. This is all designed strictly to humiliate them. Okay, because if you read in Quran chapter 9, that I have been sent to fight the people until they pay the jizya and feel themselves subdued. This is what was happening to the Christians in those lands, and thus this is what they were doing. So in 846, now let me go back to this. I want to go here. In 846, sorry, I can't see my tabs. Okay, fine. I can't find the tab, but in 846, the burial sites of St. Peter and St. Paul, who are two of the apostles, were desecrated when, for the second time, Rome was attacked by Islamic armies. Okay. We also have stories of Vlad the Impaler, for instance. He was actually imprisoned by the Muslims. In fact, families of his died, and he was the one who impaled thousands of Muslims on stakes, because he realized, and even the Crusaders realized, that these people wanted death. They were willing to fight to the death. These people wanted Christian blood, and unless the Christians had the same bloodthirst when they went to battle, they would be killed. Any comments or questions?
No, it's pretty clear.
Okay, so there were rules of war, right? You were told when a siege army comes, you either surrender or you take all consequences. So lots of times during these ugly battles where atrocities happened, those were the rules of war of the day. In fact, it was pretty normal, so there was nothing exceptional. Okay, now let's see. Okay, I want to then briefly go to a small diversion. Oh, gosh, this. Okay, let me go through this. Okay, I want to introduce to everyone a book, and I've provided links in the past to this for everyone. It's called The Virtues of Jihad, The Shortest Path to Heaven. Okay, by this guy, Maulana Muhammad Masood Azhar. And I've provided links to this book for everyone to download. This is an easy-to-read book, beautifully organized by chapter. Everything you ever wanted to know about jihad, but were afraid to ask, it is right here, given full explanation and given all of the Islamic divine reasons for it. So it provides all of the Islamic reasons for jihad. It gives you the definitions of jihad from all the four schools of fiqh. It tells you that jihad is obligatory. It is commanded by Allah. Anyone who denies jihad is a kafir, and people who doubt the obligation of jihad have gone astray. They are hypocrites. That's in the Fath al-Qadir. So offensive jihad is when Muslims blah, blah, blah. And so everything is here, jihad. So you can actually read this and you can grab pieces out of this, because, man, it is insanely good what it tells you. So in terms of jihad.
Or insanely bad, anyway.
Yeah. But if you want to know about jihad, that is a scholar that knows the subject and explains it. So we are never sent to see, we are not meant to see these books, right? So now we have a manual that tells us exactly what these people are thinking. So Allah loves those who fight, Quran 61:4. Allah loves those who fight in his cause in battle array as if they were a solid cemented structure. I thought jihad was about having more salads, going to the gym and being nicer to people, right? Tabari 969. Arabs were the first to respond to the call of the Prophet. We are Allah's helpers and the viziers of his messenger. We fight people until they believe in Allah, right? One who disbelieves, we will fight him forever in the cause of Allah. Killing him is a small matter to us. Then our Prophet, the messenger of Allah, has ordered us to fight till we worship Allah alone. Okay? We bound ourselves to war against all mankind for Allah and his apostle. Many times you'll be told there was the Pledge of Aqaba, which was all peaceful. Fine, it was abrogated by the second Pledge of Aqaba, which bound these Muslims to war against all mankind forever. And here we go. The Messenger of Allah said, there's another act which elevates the position of a man in paradise to a grade 100 higher, and the elevation between one grade and the other is equal to the height of heaven from earth. And Abu Sa'id said, what is that act? And Muhammad replied, jihad in the way of Allah. Jihad in the way of Allah. This is the highest act within Islam, jihad, which is killing or being killed in the name of Allah. Whereas, remember I said earlier, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy strength, and love thy neighbor as thyself. Those are the two prime directives in Christianity that Jesus gave. You contrast that with this. Okay? Other things. So, I want to talk again a little bit about the nature of Muhammad. Any comments, questions from you, Jan?
No.
So now I'm going towards some of the doctrinal justifications for lying. I need to cover this as well. If I take an oath and later find something better than that, then I do what is better and I expiate my oath. In other words, Muhammad could break oaths. This eventually led us to what's called hudna, which is the breaking of treaties. There are examples, several examples throughout the Islamic scriptures about this. Okay. Then the Prophet said, who is ready to kill Ashraf? Ashraf was a Jewish poet who wrote things about Muhammad, who made fun of him. Okay. So this was a Jewish poet. There were numerous people that actually wrote about Muhammad, made fun of him, and were killed, including young girls. Okay. He said injurious things about Allah and his apostle. Maslama got up and saying, "O Allah's apostle, would you like me to kill him?" The Prophet replied, "Yes." Maslama said, "Then allow me to say what I like." In other words, different translations will say different things. Allow me to lie. And Muhammad said, "I allow you." Which means that if Muhammad did something, it is both legal and moral in Islam for all Muslims for all time. Therefore, it is sunnah. Ashraf suspected no evil when Maslama cried, "Smite the enemy of Allah." I thrust the knife into the lower part of his body. I bore it down until it reached his genitals. We carried his head back to Muhammad and saluted the Prophet. The Prophet praised Allah that the poet had been killed and complimented us on the good work we had done. The morning after the murder of Ashraf, the Prophet declared, "Kill any Jew who falls under your power." Don't forget, this command is for all time, said by the perfect Muslim. Thereupon Masud leapt upon Sunaina, one of the Jewish merchants with whom his family had social and commercial relations, and killed him, an innocent man. His brother complained, saying, "Why did you kill him? You have much fat in your belly from his charity." Masud answered, "By Allah, had Muhammad ordered me to murder you, my brother, I would have cut off your head." Wherein the brother said, "Any religion that can bring you to do this is indeed wonderful." They asked the Prophet for permission to kill Salam. He granted it. "And my little girl," cried Uqba in bitterness, "who will take care of her?" "Hellfire," Muhammad responded. At that moment he was decapitated. "Wretch that you were," Muhammad said. The Prophet gave orders to torture Kinana, saying, "Torture him until you find out where he has hidden the gold." So Zubair kindled a fire on Kinana's chest and then ultimately beheaded him. "Will no one rid me of this woman?" So Umair removed the suckling baby from the woman and plunged his sword into the poet. This is an example of Muhammad. Now, this simply carried over into his doctrine of jihad and killing and mistreating anyone who stood in his way, who stood in the way of his jihad to impose Islam on the entire world. Any thoughts or comments?
Oh, many. I mean, it's like, wow. There's no peace and love there, that's for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight that. So Pope Urban writing now, let's contrast Pope Urban II now. Okay, fine. I mean, we've had discussions about the Catholic Church, but let's see. Urban II gave the Crusaders two goals, which would remain central to the Eastern Crusades. The first was to rescue the Christians of the East, and his successor, Pope Innocent III, later wrote, "How does a man love, according to divine precept, his neighbor as himself, when knowing that his Christian brothers in faith and in name are held by the perfidious Muslims in strict confinement and weighed down by the yoke of heaviest certitude?" This is referring to the dimitude and to slavery. "He does not devote himself to the task of freeing them. Is it by any chance that you do not know that many thousands of Christians are bound in slavery and imprisoned by the Muslims, tortured with innumerable torments?" So the prime expert on the Crusades would be Professor Jonathan Riley Smith, apparently, and he said that crusading was considered an act of love of one's neighbor. So they went there to free their neighbors who were being tortured under Islam. Any comments?
Well, it's just an inversion. So they do a war to, to love people. They kill and enslave people to love them. I mean, it's like, wow, it's totally the antithesis of Christianity in the darkest way.
Yeah. No, the Crusades were necessary. They were critically necessary, or they would have overrun all of Europe. You saw in the video, the animation. Couple of things here. This is Al Qaeda. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about something a little bit controversial. For instance, now 9/11. Now I know everyone's got a conspiracy theory, and again, they can't all be right because so many are contradictory.
Yeah,
Okay,
the main thing that most people say is that Israel was behind it, and you've got the dancing Jews and this stuff that ends,
well,
and this
agreed.
sort of thing. Silverstein, etc.
Look, I agree. There are questions about 9/11. I agree that there are questions about how those buildings came down. I think they look to me like they were demolished with explosives. That was a controlled demolition. That it looks to me like it. I can't prove it. But when I look at it, I cannot also just reject the evidence out of hand, right? So yeah, I mean there are questions, but also and we have said crimes can be hidden within crimes. You can piggyback on top of chaos. Now, for some reason, though, we are willing to blame anyone and everyone, but always give Islam a pass. Now, Osama bin Laden was very much intent on carrying out 9/11. This was his intent for many years. He spent a lot of time planning it, and he wrote extensively. And I read his documents. It was some years ago when I was doing my counterterrorism course. I read through the documentation that he had written, and I'm willing to bet that no one who loves these conspiracy theories has actually read the damn stuff. Because also, when I read through all of these things like Napoleon founded Islam, the Jesuits founded it, whatever, everyone who writes about these things somehow never connects the dots and actually has never read Islam. They know nothing about Islamic doctrine. They know nothing about the life of Muhammad. It's always about finding blame, placing blame somewhere else. I'm very skeptical of that.
And claiming that the Muslims are completely innocent of any
Innocent,
wrongdoing
correct.
forever and ever. Amen.
Correct. Now, I want to look at the Islamic contribution to 9/11. Again, I believe there are questions. I believe there was controlled demolition. I mean, to my mind, hey, I could be wrong. I have no evidence. But when I look at those buildings, yeah, that looks to me like that was. So someone knew this was happening, and someone used that as an opportunity to commit their own crimes. Okay, so Muhammad was a brilliant man of war. He was actually unconventional. He was very, very good at what he did. He cheated, he lied, he did everything. He called war a form of deceit long before Mossad ever got there. People love to say, Mossad says by way of deception. Well, Muhammad was there like 1,000 years before they ever got there. Okay. In fact, Muhammad was there like 2,000 years before, 1,300 years before they ever got there. Sorry. So he was unconventional. Now, when we look at his pattern of conduct, and if anything, Osama bin Laden was a good Muslim. He's a Salafi. He wanted to follow Islam to the letter and the example of Muhammad to the letter. Wahhabism is good Islam, right? It's not an aberration. It is Islam to the letter, right? He did everything according to the Quran, and he did everything according to the Sunnah of Muhammad. He actually reached out and he said, convert to Islam or we will have to fight you. He followed all of the steps. I'll go through a handful of the precepts of Islam that he followed to the letter. Okay. So 9/11 is modeled after Muhammad's actions in that the men who did it were immigrants to America. Muhammad did not take up jihad until he was an immigrant. Muhammad was a prophet who had 70 converts in 13 years. In other words, a failure. Only once he took up jihad after he got political and military power, did he convert people. What people don't realize is that Osama bin Laden also wrote a manifesto. He laid out a 20-year process or 21-year process with 7 stages, and 9/11 was the first shot in a 21-year campaign, which would lead to the resurgence of Islam, and Islam would then attack the rest of the world. Okay, so 9/11 was simply the first salvo, the opening salvo of a 21-year plan with 7 stages, and we are very close to the end game now. So you can look at what's been happening around you and factor that in. Okay, time zero was chosen okay, because of immigration, the beginning of Muhammad's political success. Now, September the 11th was chosen because that is the day that Islam was reigning supreme in Europe. The Turks, the Ottoman Turks, had taken over 200,000 soldiers and walked to Vienna casually. They were at the gates of Vienna. They had besieged it for 60 days. And on September the 11th, they were reigning supreme. No one could stop them. An army a third their size, led by King Jan Sobieski, arrived on the afternoon of September the 11th and went to battle at 4 a.m. the next morning and kicked their asses. They crushed the Turkish army and chased them out of Europe. But that took 3 years. So 9/11 to bin Laden, whatever else you want to think that the 11th, look, whatever, I don't care. But according to bin Laden, the 9/11, that date was symbolic because that was the resurgence of Islam in the West. So the day that Islam was crushed, he was going to use that as the date to make it resurgent. That was his thinking. Okay, so the attack on the World Trade Center violated the rules of war, which is Muhammad's tactics. There was no shame or remorse. Have you ever seen any shame or remorse from inside the Islamic community? The most popular book in the Arab world after 9/11 was written by a man who was in a jail cell with Zawahiri. His criticism of Zawahiri was not that what he had done was immoral, but that what he had done was wake up America, the sleeping giant. But this was actually the intent of what Osama was doing. Okay, Muslims have expressed no remorse over slavery, not because they're innocent, but because they don't feel guilty at all. Muhammad never expressed any remorse over the death of a kafir. I gave you those examples. He had men, women, and children murdered just for mocking him. Now, here's another thing. 2 days after 9/11, and something that people don't know, telephones began ringing in churches all across the US. Okay? The other person would say, I'm a Muslim who would like to come to your church and give a seminar on Islam, the peaceful religion. Who can do that in 48 hours across an entire country? Who can do that? Okay? Did they launch a uniform public relations exercise in 48 hours after massive chaos of the 9/11 attacks? Or was this planned in advance across the entire Islamic Ummah through the ulama, which are the learned ones, basically your imams? Were they aware? Was this planned? Okay. So America was called to Islam before the attack. He issued the call first. This is patterns after the perfect jihad of Muhammad. He called it a defensive attack. Now, all jihad is defensive because the kafir creates the first offense by denying Muhammad and denying Allah. After 9/11, Islam started attacking the kafirs by calling them crusaders. Notice we were not crusaders prior to 9/11. Now we are crusaders. The crusades ended 747 years ago. The crusade can only be called by a pope. Any Muslim, any random Muslim at any time can go on jihad. Anywhere, anytime. So I will leave that there, and I'll show this. This is an Al-Qaeda manual, military series, Declaration of Jihad. So yeah, I can actually provide you some of Al-Qaeda's documents. I read this a long time ago. I haven't read it recently. And the principles of military organization, and it says very clearly that we have to forge documents, we have to hide, we need communication means. Then Al-Qaeda's lone wolf, prepare against them whatever you are able of power of steeds of war by which you may terrify the enemy of Allah and your enemy. And they say here, no doubt, America's war, that today's war, Islamic war with America, is a war of information, a covert war. Okay? And soon, so our war today is a covert war, and to ensure victory, you have to be cautious. It's a guerrilla war. And of course, this wonderful book, The Management of Savagery, the most critical stage through which the Ummah, the Muslim community, will pass. In other words, we do not have the stomach for the brutality and the violence and the bloodshed that jihad will unleash, and we will give up because we are too weak to fight back. These are all Al-Qaeda documents. I'll stop there. That's me.
Wow. Well, I don't know if anybody has any comments in the chat. Yeah, 9/11 has created a stream of Muslims into Europe. How convenient.
Yes. Remember, Osama, look up Osama's 7-stage plan. 9/11 was just the first shot. It was designed to do what it did. It was designed to wake up America, and then to create a feeling of animosity and a resurgence of Islamic pride, and to reawaken jihad. This plan ends
So
in
it was a Hegelian dialectic, essentially.
Man, it's been a while since I've read through
Yeah,
that.
so thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Okay, yeah. Well, this plan ends in 2021. We're in the final stage. The first 5 stages of his plan was spot on. If you go through the stages of the plan that Muhammad wrote,
Osama bin Laden.
wrote, the first 5 stages was spot on. He was following the
You
plan.
want to turn off the share screen?
Of course, sir. The plan was happening to the letter. Stage 6 was a little fuzzy, but we now have Europe flooded with potential jihadis, and we are now entering stage 7, where civil war breaks out, asymmetric guerrilla warfare.
Wow.
The same has been happening in America. You just don't know about it. Your southern border. Hezbollah's been sending troops to Venezuela to be trained by Chavez to speak Spanish. And, well, no longer Chavez, of course, but to speak Spanish. And then these Hezbollah operatives from Iran as well were then sent north into America. They've set up their cells.
Wow, incredible. Well, they're sure not teaching us this. I mean, so you got all these pink pussy hat women, cheering for Islam, etc. And, it's all smoke and mirrors.
Yeah. Look, I'm not saying there aren't other players in the game. There are other players. Look, Coke competes with Pepsi, right? They compete with Dr. Pepper, and or maybe they own each other. Maybe it's all fake competition. Who knows, right? But Coke certainly does compete with Pepsi at the very least. So certainly, and they don't always have good intentions for each other. Sometimes they work together. Sometimes they actually cooperate. Sometimes they fight. Some places they fight, and some places they cooperate. So it's not as black and white as we would like it to be.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the strategy of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, essentially.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, so obviously the Crusade is not my strong point. I'm better with the Islamic scriptures and doctrine and history, but I try to relate the Crusades to the history of Islam, to the doctrine, and to especially the example of Muhammad, and to show that there is a connection with all of these events that happened as jihad. These are all events of jihad. It is not simply just normal wars of conquest. They were religiously and divinely inspired.
Well, religiously anyway. I'm not sure about divinely, but
yeah, agreed. Yeah, understood.
Wow. Anything else to add?
No, that's me. I mean, I'm not sure how many episodes we still have left in the series. So perhaps there'd be input from the audience as to what they want to discuss. There was things about the women, about deception in Islam. We've covered jihad pretty thoroughly. Not every last thing, certainly, but we've covered it thoroughly. Slavery we've done.
Yeah, well, there was a couple others that we talked about last week that we were going to do this week. So why don't we go into women and, we had discussed pedophilia, etc. as well.
Yeah, that's part of women. That's actually the pedophilia and the treatment of women actually link up. It's actually one topic for me. So any relevant comments or anything useful from
the only one is from Polygonal Construction. He says a return to Christian values is the key. Yep, I mean that's it right
agree.
there.
I do agree to that. I actually do firmly agree with that. I mean, I'm not here on the show I'm here to discuss the facts as I can read them and as anyone can look them up. But yes, I do believe that we've lost our foundation and we need to return to a better moral foundation. And we need to realize we are under it. Yep.
Well, and that's another thing that Islam discusses is that it's going to kill those who fall into iniquity. And what do we see everywhere? I mean, the feminists killing, mass murder of babies and infanticide. I mean, you can't get any worse than that. And them having parades in New York about killing children. It's like it's absolutely asinine. It's insanity. It's Baphomet. And
Yeah.
There isn't. I mean, there's no words for it. You know, they're sacrificing the most innocent of our society to Moloch or Baphomet or whatever, and then celebrating about it. And it's a trick to get women to sacrifice the firstborn child, or the first child, and they really don't get it. And we have all of this, this red herring look over there tactic, while Islam is sneaking in everywhere, and and everybody's asleep about it. It's absolutely phenomenal. I mean,
No, look, there's the destruction of the feminine, because I believe the feminine is sacred. I believe that femininity is to be cherished, and it is the destruction of the feminine, but also we're seeing the destruction of the masculine. And again, we've had some religious discussions offline, but I do believe that Christianity needs to be muscular. It needs to be strong. That your morals have to have muscle to back it up. We are in a fight. We have to have the truth. We have to have the facts to debate with, to discuss with, to convince people with, or to know from what to act. We have to know, well, look, this is right and this is wrong, and we need to know history. And I think we've lost that muscular Christianity, and we are.
Yeah, the men here are so caught up into the transgender, effeminate, soy, the whole soy boy agenda that they're called. And the women are out trying to be men and acting like men, and the whole feminist thing. It's really to get women to act like men, and I don't want to give away too much, but it's clear that birth control actually masculinizes women and causes women to lose their empathy, and we'll talk about more on that topic hopefully in the coming months, but it's phenomenal. There is one question here from Linux Freak. He says, what about Saladin, which is venerated as the ultimate Muslim during the Second Crusades?
Salahuddin, yeah.
Salahuddin.
Saladin. That's the typical Anglicization of the name, Salahuddin. Now, just a point on that. You might remember there was a guy in New York recently who was captured as he was trying to kill people in a jihad act. His name was Saifullah, Saifullah, UL, and they gave all these weird spellings. But the fact is that no matter what the variation is, and you'll find many, many variations of names, Saif is sword, and Allah is Allah.
Sword of Allah.
He was the sword of Allah. Muhammad was the sword of Allah. Now, Salahuddin, I could be wrong because I don't have the reference in front of me. I actually read extensively while looking at these notes about Salahuddin.
And this whole thing is being promoted as we're intolerant, and white people are so intolerant, and then they slip all of this crap right in the back door.
Correct. Salahuddin, Salah is prayer, okay? And Deen is the faith, the religion, the creed. Well, Aqidah is creed, but Deen is the religion. He is the prayer of the religion, the hope of the religion. Salahuddin, I'm the hope of the religion. In other words, to smash the Crusaders. In fact, if you look at 1683, the Battle of Vienna, can I take a moment just to get these notes? Actually, it's going to be very quick. If we look at why they went to Vienna, this will explain the attitude and the reasoning that these people gave. It's a very short section. I'm just going to... So I did read extensively about Salahuddin. He was obviously a very popular general, very capable, formidable. However, he... I can't remember without going to notes. I will not be able to remember much about him. But I'm just going to pull up something about the Battle of Vienna, which is relevant to that question. Because he had the very same attitudes and he had the very same intentions as all of the other people who were attacking the West. Here we go. Okay, so this is about Kara Mustafa. Okay, Mustafa Pasha, the Grand Vizier of the Ottoman Empire. He was sent by the emperor to capture the city of Vienna because they'd attacked it about in 1529, I believe. They'd been rebuffed, and now they came back, and they were looking for a war, and they got it. So, okay, not that one. And I need to get. Okay, so the massive Ottoman army under Sultan Mehmed reached Belgrade, right? And in the words of Kara Mustafa, he said all the Christians would obey the Ottomans. Sorry, so I thought there was more. I thought I had taken, but I don't have more notes there. So
Yeah, you
to
know,
him,
I used to live in Belgrade, and you know, I mean, there's monuments all over the place about them being under the Ottoman Turks for 400 years and the slaughter of the Christians and everything. You hear about it constantly.
yeah, because they came there with the intention of destroying Christianity, destroying Christendom, destroying churches, and imposing their will over the Christians, humiliating them. And Salahuddin was the same. In fact, one of the worst, most egregious of the propaganda items. And look, it's a movie that I love. I've watched it like 5 times. I love to crank up the volume and watch it, but it's complete historical. I nearly swore. I don't. Do you allow swearing on your channel?
Go for it. They're warned.
No.
Cover your children's ears, folks.
Yeah, it's 3:00 in the morning here, so I'm safe for the people outside. It's 3:21 a.m. here, so no, but it's complete nonsense. Historical nonsense is, you know, the movie about Jerusalem with Balian. Oh my, Kingdom of Heaven. Love the movie. Historically, it's complete crap. Okay, it
Yeah,
paints
I
the
don't know.
Christians as vicious barbarians and the Muslims as virtuous, and it is completely wrong. And unfortunately, people are learning their history from movies.
Well, yeah, you know, and it's told that I've heard stories. Oh, you know, the Muslims were so noble that many of the Christian crusaders, when they met them, they ended up converting to Islam because the Muslims were so much more noble than the Christians. And now we're finding out that this is entirely untrue.
Well, if the Muslim world is so advanced and developed, how come they've had almost 0 Nobel Prizes in science? And you look at how many, for instance, to take an example, Israel. You look at the difference, 8 million people in one country versus like, I don't know, what, 1 billion people? And the entire 1.5 billion Islamic population has had, what, in the last 50, 60 years, 3 Nobel Prizes in science?
Yeah.
You know, you compare that to the West, you compare that to America alone with what, 1/6 of the population? They're not developed. Islam stunts the development of nations. Islam, in fact, Spain and Israel are of those countries you saw where Islam attacked. Spain and Israel are the only 2 countries to ever throw off the yoke of Islam after being fully conquered.
Wow.
Right? Now,
And,
it is also
well, and Serbia, but still not Bosnia.
well, they weren't fully conquered, as they weren't completely conquered.
Right.
But
Well,
other
and then
countries-
Bosnia, Albania. I mean, and look at what Albania was doing in Kosovo. And I say Kosovo, no, not, you know, I do not honor the Albanian pronunciation of Kosova, but it's, you know, and they were killing farmers and running guns and drugs into Kosovo and into Serbia, etc. And then the United States under Bill Clinton painted the Serbs as the aggressors, and this was, you know, when I was living there.
But you know what's fascinating is I can't remember the name of the guy who was the Serbian, the Christians, right? The guy who was Milosevic.
Yeah, Slobodan Milosevic
He was tried. I mean, obviously he died in captivity,
in the Hague. Yeah,
and very suspiciously because he had given evidence and he had said, and I've read through hours of the transcripts. I've actually read through the transcripts
Wow.
from his crying, and he said, no, I was at the time I was really intrigued by this. He actually said that he was going to give evidence that showed that he had not attacked first. He said very clearly, I did not attack first. Our people were being attacked in jihad.
yeah, absolutely they were, and it
Our
was all
people being
painted. Yep,
I
and
defended our people, right?
yeah,
And what happened was his evidence was struck from the court transcripts.
wow,
that evidence was struck. I was shocked to learn that. And it's so they wanted to paint them. So it makes me ask, how deep does the Islamic infiltration go into Western institutions?
Well, and you have Huma Abedin in Hillary Clinton's campaign there and all that. And then, of course, Bill Clinton was president during the whole attack against Yugoslavia, and I was living with my wife at the time in Belgrade with her family there, and we're witnessing the U.S., attack the country on entirely false premises. And every day I would see on the news, we'd be at home and they'd have the news how the evil Serbs were doing this and doing that. And you go outside and what the heck, the story on the news media in the United States never matched what was happening in the streets of Belgrade, Belgrade.
When I was in the Middle East, there were wars happening in the Middle East that didn't make it to the news for months. Right. In fact, I know for a fact there were wars happening in the Middle East that have never made the news.
Wow. Well,
there are things that happen.
Well, I was just going to add, Serbs are.
I hope I gave a good account.
Serbs are pretty well the largest European audience I have still today, and on my now banned for a month Facebook page as well. But thankfully, one thing that we taught them in our bogus war against Yugoslavia was for the Serbs to arm up, and now they are the second most heavily armed people in the world next to the United States. So,
good.
That's good for them, really good for them.
Good.
So anyway, anything else?
Well, if obviously if I can get some constructive feedback from people in the comments afterwards, and also if I can get thoughts and questions in advance from people, I'd appreciate some good questions. They can send them to you. Questions things of interest they'd like to discuss in the next episode. I said I don't know how many more episodes we'll have, one or two, but I mean we're wrapping up at this point, I think.
Yeah, and I just posted your donation link up on the chat.
I appreciate that. I hope I've given people enough of an overview to go and do their own research, to verify for themselves. I'm able to provide most of the documentation you need, the books, the resources, the links. I have an extensive database. I'm happy to clue people in. If I can get some questions for next time, I can prepare. And, so besides the main topic, if there are things I can clarify, and hopefully you will take up the torch and you will also push back against the lies.
Yeah, and please support the show. We only got in $40 for last week and this week's show without the super chat and everything. We really need people to support. Again, they're trying to shut me out everywhere. We can't keep the stuff going without financial support. So please, folks, stay on that and support all you can.
Yeah, guys, please support Jan. Again, I am grateful. Thank you, Jan, for giving me a platform and allowing me to speak, the opportunity to present this. I'm very grateful for that, that you were willing to hear me out and, give me this opportunity to speak to your audience. Please do support Jan. He does need it. Look, he's had, as you've seen, he's having lots of issues, Facebook, YouTube, I think the word needs to get out. It's frustrating that one has to work against all of these obstacles just to get the truth out, and he can't do it without your help. So please do provide him support.
All right, yeah. So anyway, that's a wrap for tonight. We got the next one next week on Tuesday, as long as we can keep pushing through this stuff. So we'll see you then, and I guess that's it for tonight. Please support. Thank both of us. Really appreciate it. And thanks again, Andrew, for the banner back there. And really appreciate it. And see you all next week.
Take care, everyone.